So welcome to this episode in the podcast series about wisdom, brought to you by Stuart Neville from Mindful Developments and Adam Wells from adamwells.com. I've got another question to think about with me. It's this kind of issue of human beings. We're both social by nature and we're individual. We have our individuality and we have our social, we bond. And sometimes there's a balance to be found between our connectedness and cooperation and seeing the world the same way as other people that we're in groups with, and our own individual integrity. So I think that it's a natural thing to want to belong in a group and to have a place we feel safe and supported, where we can expect some kindness or some compassion, where we trust people. When it's reciprocal and we're in a group like that, there's a deep human need for that. So you have it in your family, hopefully to a good enough extent in any case, if you're lucky, and then we look for it in other groups that we belong to. It's not always like that in groups. That's when things are going well. Sometimes when we're in groups, it can be competitive and lots of other dynamics can be happening that aren't pleasant at all. Do you think?
I do. I think we are social animals, and why we are in groups and why we do belong is to survive. Go back thousands of years to the tribes. If you're cast out from the tribe into the wilderness, you didn't survive for very long on your own. I think there's two things: parts where we belong with part of society. We want to be loved. We want to love as well. Friendship and everything else. There's the individual in us. And so I think there's an awareness of who am I in the group and who am I when I'm alone? How do I marry up those two dynamics in my life?
That's the challenge, isn't it? And I think part of the thing is that sense of belonging and that really nurturing, idealized group is something that we all want, and we have it from time to time. And I think in terms of expectations and what's like a deep yearning within us, the kind of belonging holds so much promise. But it's bound to fail because that feeling of belonging is fragile. The kind of bonds of trust and mutual support, you've got that within a group, but then you've also got within groups other things going on. So in particular, you have kind of systems of control and power in groups. You have subgroups, you have cliques where, you're either in this subgroup within the group or that subgroup, and people have alliances and then they compete within groups. And groups can behave with real cruelty as well. Idealize one person and put them on a pedestal, and then they can scapegoat someone else and throw them to the wolves. And then it can switch around.
Lord of the Flies.
Yesterday's saviors, like tomorrow's scapegoat. And then you have the thing within groups where there's a majority view and some unspoken rules and a common ideology, and everyone's expected to conform to it. And if you don't, if you have like the whistleblower, you stand outside that, then you're liable to get a pretty, at times, aggressive response from the group because you're threatening the group's ideology. So being in a group has both promises this warm, kind of nurturing experience, but it's also quite a dangerous place to be. And being an individual in a group really is a dilemma. You're between a rock and a hard place. Part of you wants it. Part of you is having to fight for survival. Part of you is about mutual trust and bonding and etc. And then you've got your question of, well, where's my individuality in this? It's a challenging experience being an individual and also being belonging to groups.
My metaphor for this scenario is my time on the Camino de Santiago, where we all go as an individual. And then in the first 2 or 3 days, you find yourself building your Camino family. So this is the small group that you'll most likely end up walking across Spain with. And depending on who you are as an individual, can determine how your entire journey across Spain will be. Because, for example, you join a group, and generally a group will have a leader, and there'll be somebody that's very dynamic. I want to do this. Now, if you've joined that group because you're walking your Camino, but you're afraid of being alone whilst you walk across Spain, you may well stay in the group, and you'll be walking at the pace of the group, and you'll be having the group's Camino experience, which may not be what you actually would have wanted. You wanted to actually have more of a inner journey to discover yourself, but your fear didn't allow you to speak up and say, actually, guys, I'll see you in a few days. I'm going to walk alone now. That dynamic between being in the group and the individuality. It's back to self-awareness and discerning whether actually, am I getting out of this group what I truly want, and am I contributing to the group what the group needs? So that's just a sort of mini experience with groups across Spain, where I've seen people really have not enjoyed the journey, stuck in the group when they should have spoken up to step out and do something different.
It strikes me as a metaphor, someone that kind of does a job and they stay in the job even though it's like that Radiohead song, OK Computer, the job that slowly kills you. At the end of it, you get a carbon monoxide handshake. Can you jump ship or take a risk or what have you? There's an attachment bond, which is important, but also sometimes the dynamic in the group isn't helpful for us. And it's hard because the bonds and the attachments can still mean a lot to us. Even when the dynamics, it's like families, even when the dynamic might be quite destructive in a way, it's still this kind of bond of affection and attachment there. There's something about being an individual and being able to make your own decisions and do what's right, what feels right to you, and have your integrity, etc. Whilst being in groups is really hard. It's a hard juggling act, or it's a hard kind of balance to find. But I think it's important to find it so that the group identity doesn't become destructive for us. There are times when being in a group carries us forward, and there are times when it doesn't in our personal development or our journey towards wisdom. Thinking about ourselves and our group where we feel a sense of belonging, we'll potentially learn something, understand something about ourselves by reflecting on that conformity, non-conformity dilemma.
Back to Joseph Campbell, the final stage, you come back after your hero's journey, you're the master of both worlds. I think what he means by that is the master of being in society, in the group and belonging, and you're also the master of your own world, going inside, knowing who you are as an individual. And I think that's our journey through life. At times we belong to the group, belong to society, and then at times we will be alone. That's the journey we have to find a way to do through life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really do agree. And I think the willingness to leave a group or even potentially be kicked out by the group or attacked by the group for the sake of your individuality or your integrity, that's a common theme, isn't it? If you have a choice between your integrity and your sense of belonging, many people in many situations will choose the sense of belonging because if you don't, you're going to suffer some sort of consequence. So you're in an organization, if you don't conform up to a certain point, you could lose your job and then you lose your income. So you don't button your lip and you go along with it because there's a detriment to leaving the group. But eventually it might switch around, or actually if you stay in the group too much, if it doesn't kind of feel like you're having to compromise your own integrity or your own authenticity, or you might find a group where you can really be yourself and it's very nurturing, but not always.
Yeah, it's that growth thing. If you have to leave the group and you're on your own, then you're having to look after yourself, survive for yourself. So there's that element of growth and resilience that you will find by being alone. It is a dance between the two, as and when these situations arise, these opportunities arise.
Well, here's a kind of another angle on that sense of belonging, is that in some groups, like particularly like bigger organizations, the kind of experience of belonging really is around conforming to a system. And the system can be quite mechanistic, quite robotic, quite automatic. And the name of the game is to conform with the system. That's become a corporate member of this kind of corporate machine in the sense. And to do that, sometimes one is required to cut off from or suppress or de-emphasize your own humanity, because your humanity and your integrity and your conscience may even often, wouldn't take you in the same direction as the corporate direction, or the direction of the overall system. So it's something Joseph Campbell talks about, a theme in lots of myths, is that there often comes a time when there's a choice between your kind of individuality and your humanity and your conscience and your integrity and what's required to conform and to seek power or seek success through the identity with the bigger corporate hierarchical system, etc. There's a choice between the two. And it's a standard motif, isn't it, in kind of myths and stories, is, at what point, when does somebody have the courage to follow and prioritize their humanity over the power that comes from progressing in a system that isn't designed on the respect for the humanity of the individual.
I think that's that wake-up call, a moment of truth. It's like, what's this all about? And you're truly, truly challenged, literally a dividing path on the road.
Yeah.
Which way do I go? And it's a difficult choice. But
it really is.
That goes back to our consciousness and inner truth. Who am I as a person? Yeah. That's where we get the answers from.
I think sometimes the crunch comes when the group is behaving in a way collectively, and you start to get a sense of an awareness that actually that doesn't feel right. So, for example, it's very common for groups to operate on them and us basis. Like if you're in the group, then you're part of us, and if you're not in the group, you're them. And we look after each other in the group, but we're quite happy being quite immoral or inhumane or cruel or what have you to people outside the group, because we've categorized them in a different way. They're not the same as us. They don't have the same right. We don't need to feel particularly kind of empathic or compassionate about them because they're the others. They're potentially a bit dangerous. They're against us, our group. Otherwise, they'd be in it. And the same morality doesn't apply. And if you kind of go along with that and you demonize the others, the competitors, the different ethnic group or whatever it is, benefits of being in the us group, you just enjoy them, and it's
and the other group's doing exactly the same thing.
Exactly, and then they're doing the other things. So it's kind of simpler in a way. But if you're in the group and you don't collude with that, or you don't see the others in the same way, or say you've kind of got more of a humane or real connection with somebody in the group, and you realise they're a human being too, they're not the enemy. It's then hard to go along with that unconscious bias that comes with the membership. And then if you were to say, well, hang on a minute, let's not kind of completely harm this other group because they're not the other to me anymore, that will not conform with what's in the group's interests.
Is it not the level of consciousness within the group? It's the journey of maturity. We become conscious that actually, we're all the same. Our similarities outweigh our differences. And you get to that level of thinking, wow, these people are exactly the same as us. When you create that enemy, the shadow aspect of us, where we want an enemy because we don't want to go inside ourselves, so we need an enemy to project it to.
For sure, absolutely.
And so therefore, it's the group needs to go inside itself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of psychologists that have written about this. There's an unconsciousness in group dynamics based on kind of polarization and projection. You're not conscious of your own weakness or your own failure or your own bad qualities because they're all nicely located in the enemy, and then it's fine just to fight with them because you're right and they're wrong. And that sense of I'm right and my little group all agree with me and they're wrong isn't a very conscious or inspiring quality. And yet, honestly, that's how a lot of groups function. It's very, very common. Individuality in the positive sense of having your integrity and your reflectiveness and being able to feel when that feels wrong and judge where you want to go yourself and whether that takes you away, whether you prioritize your own humanity and your own what feels right to you, even if it goes against the belonging kind of thing. It takes courage and it takes kind of fortitude, but I think it's an important aspect of life to be reflective about.
I think it's part of you walking your own path through life.
Yes.
I know who I am. I know what my path is. So I agree. I fully agree with you.
So another question we can kind of live with: where's our individuality? Where's our belonging? What's valuable about both? What's potentially unvaluable about our belonging, or even potentially our difficulties bonding or belonging as well? I don't think the answers are clear cut, but I think asking the questions and being aware of that in your life is conducive for, as you say, finding your own path.